We're just going to put doilies on everything, and we're going to meet the girl of our dreams while vacationing in the mountains. He gave a timeline. He said he expected that everything would fall apart to where it would not be safe in society. There would not be civilized society within 5 years.
Right. Are we recording?
We're recording.
Sweet.
So you brought Quill Smith with us today, huh?
I did. I thought,
He's a
rather than
prop.
just empty table, that he can just sit there and people can look at him rather than us.
You know, the challenge is...
Don't touch him. Yeah. Those are real porcupine quills stuffed into a Play-Doh porcupine. He's the mascot for the Libertarian Party. And, yeah, we had a contest. We named him Quill Smith. But those are real quills. And if you touch them, they will poke you and get stuck, and
They will,
you'll
absolutely.
feel it. So yeah, don't be waving around and...
I don't know that I have significant control of that.
Well, he's there to help give you some.
So in the video last week, I noticed I used my hands like a lot, and I think it was distracting.
Oh.
But I liked, like in the demo.
I would think you probably have handcuffs you could use to fix that.
Nah, I don't do that.
All right.
In the demo, like the intro frame that you had, you were like leaning in and talking, and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
And I think it was it was a good draw. Like it pulled people in. I think just because it looked like
The thumbnail?
It looked like an action frame.
Yeah.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I think what we decided on is we were going to continue the conversation we just finished with our other meeting, where we were talking about some of the cultural / political issues that may or may not occur in upcoming years. Where we had, we have a mutual friend who said rather than be involved in politics, it's time for everyone to run to the hills. And so we were discussing the time frame for that and what the problems were and that kind of stuff. And I thought we were going to try to continue that.
Right. So maybe,
I don't know if that was a good explanation.
That's good. I mean, maybe with more specificity, what was I think a little triggering to those out there that we were talking to is that he gave a timeline. He said he expected that everything would fall apart to where it would not be safe in society. There would not be civilized society within 5 years.
Right. And then, so yeah, putting that number on it is what really causes a little bit of
Trepidation.
Yeah. All right. So
5 years.
So yeah, putting that number, the 5 years, starts to have people's wheels turning because they've got plans and lives and how old is my kid and what about my job and my promotion and all that kind of garbage.
5 years also doesn't seem like that long.
Oh.
So the interesting thing was when I thought about it, I kind of agreed that it was at least possible. Now, if it is at least possible, what would it be? What would that collapse look like? And how would it happen?
Yeah.
So I think that when I ask myself, what does it look like? It gets scary to me when I answer that because what it would look like, it already looks like.
Yeah.
You don't really have fair trial. You don't really have the ability to hold elections honestly. You don't have...
And that one, whether or not it's actually fair or not, so many people distrust it, it might not matter. Keep going.
You don't have reasonable expectation of security in society.
Yeah.
And you don't have any reasonable expectation of a future if you do all the right things.
Yeah. Those are big things, but then there's also the kind of more structural ones. Money is failing. There's obviously threats of international war. There's an emerging superpower that's going to, it looks like, overtake the United States as a world superpower. Almost inevitably, that leads to major conflict.
And nobody disputes that they are communist.
Right, and so...
They declare themselves.
Yeah, so there's the social, cultural type things you talk about, but then there's also very big triggers that could cause something. So we were talking about that, and
So when most people think about the world breaking down or society breaking down, what they think, and maybe this is me projecting my thoughts onto other people, in more practical, pragmatic description, it would be you need to be able to defend your own home. You can't expect the police to show up and help you.
your own home and your own person when you're out and about.
And your own person you're about. You may not be able, you may be bartering for goods, and you may not be able to get the goods that your life depends on, whether that be water. Food, fuel. I mean, we can get endless entertainment.
Clothing.
And my guess is that will last, because that's how you keep people from, declaring.
Yes,
war
as
against
if things get really bad slowly, entertainment options will increase to hopefully distract people from the fact that they can't get shoes or eggs. That you have to increase the entertainment, so they're like, I'll come back tomorrow, but let me go turn on the next sitcom.
Well, and a lot of people, you have to create, there's a socialism element. You have to create a way that people will just stay home.
Yeah.
And if they don't have to go to work, if they're not going out, if they're not going out to a play, they're not going to travel, they are just kind of wasting away their life.
Yeah.
You kind of need them to stay home, which means they have to have some way to subsist, even if that subsistence is mediocre. The comfort level of kind of that guaranteed life, and you already see that in a significant portion of the country.
Yes.
I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were talking about how they were shocked to find out that their kids were qualified, or that they qualified for free school lunch, as well as free school breakfast. And the school was contacting them asking,
Do you want to sign your kids up?
how they were going to sign their kids up for food during the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost
they
all the
couldn't feed their own
responsibilities that parents would normally have, society started taking over, including feeding your kids. In fact, in a lot of areas with kids, there's all sorts of programs to make sure they have food and clothing. They educate them. They try to give them all the social instruction. Now they're taking over their feeding. They, in a large sense, take over the physical protection. Whereas, if something's not right at home, you come tell us, kind of the stuff. There's almost every role a parent should traditionally have and morally probably accepts towards their child. Government's taken over.
All right, so we have a clear societal breakdown, right? You and I agree that a lot of the symptoms are there.
Yes.
So that leads me to two questions to continue this train of thought. So the first is, what is it that the average citizen, the average person in America would see in their life when they would think, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world, or this is society breaking down, or this is bad? What is it that they see that tells them, do they not notice until they starve, or is there something else that happens before then?
That's a good point. The lights turning out would be a big one. Power just actually turning off would be one that people could not miss. What some other ones be? Empty grocery shelves.
We experienced some of that.
And
there was some chaos. There was some freaked out people.
Things have rebounded a lot, but longer and prolonged things like that would cause the alarm for a lot of people, but not universally. Somebody actually getting on TV and saying, we're going to undergo some kind of revolutionary change to the government, or nationwide martial law would be that kind of a signal.
War on our shores, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. If there was an invading force on continental United States,
like a clear invasion, not like a bunch of people.
Yeah, not just immigrants.
Not just a bunch of brown people moving
like
into your
the
neighborhood.
Chinese have tanks and uniformed soldiers.
Take over.
Yes, that would be something where people think, "Holy cow! We could really collapse there." Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So there's a few of them. If you have other ones, put it in the comments. Let us know what we're missing.
We're talking by the time that the shelves are empty for long periods of time, or the power goes out, or somebody actually admits it on a widespread news broadcast, or there's an actual military invasion. By the time you get to those, there's not really a lot you can do about it other than collapse and rebuild.
Right, and most of those, there's lots of warning signs that lead up to them where people should wake up to their awful situation and fix it, but it seems like not a large enough percentage of people actually do. The rest don't want to face the scary truth that there could be a problem because of just the cognitive dissonance of being able to accept something bad is happening. They don't want to face the scariness of it, and so they do nothing.
Okay. Wow, that's horrible. What would cause...
Is it wrong though?
No, it's not.
Yes, it's not good, and everyone has that to some degree in their own life. That's not a hit on people saying, "Oh, people just refuse to wake up." Everyone has to get to the point where they're willing to accept it, and it's just there's going to be a scale, and some people accept it sooner than others. But the ones where people can't really deny it are going to be invasion. Somebody says the quiet part out loud, the lights going out, or you start starving. Then there might be another one.
You're convincing me to keep my beard. I'm just saying.
We'll talk about that next week.
Those kinds of times call for strong men.
Right.
And
yeah, so I'm saying that there are steps
strength.
ahead of that where people can change and fix them, maybe outside of invasion. But not a large enough percentage of people are willing to face the difficult truth. They'd rather embrace the comforting lie.
Okay, so what are the causes? So all of these things we're saying are possible, right? Like we talked about what people would notice and they would recognize as their not despotism. What's the other when you watch movies about like post-apocalyptic or whatever, there's the word dystopian. Yeah, so the elements that people would accept are dystopian.
Yeah.
All of those seem like they are possible in the near future. What would be the cause that would actually push society, which right now has relatively well-stocked shelves, which has money that still generally works, though it's getting harder and harder. Interest rates, man. The interest rate on my HELOC has doubled. If I didn't have... Anyway, other conversation for another... Maybe we'll do a financial episode. That'll be fun. But these... What is the cause that's pushing us towards, from where we are now, which is comfortable enough for people to go back to sleep, after the COVID worries that had some of those elements, what's causing it to move forward? And what will push it to go to the next level?
Well, each one of those has different identifiable steps that lead up to them. Like war has a different one than the power going out, most likely, than the despot going to TV. But I think all of them have the underlying problem of just cultural decay.
Cultural decay is clearly the cause. It's real easy to identify the financial decay that's happened with quantitative easing and crazy interest rates being in the toilet. And the crazy inflation.
Inflation is,
And the U.S. government using our military around the world to make sure that we control the world's economy through monopolistic powers with the petrodollar and electronics and intellectual property rights.
I think a lot of these actually end up... if it weren't for the cultural rot, we wouldn't have invasion. So outside of that one, the other issues, I think... So I'm going to rephrase what I said, to the other gentleman earlier. I think a lot of the division and the strife that we're seeing in society that will that's causing the split and the rift between left and right, where everyone's getting more radical and more prone to violence and talk of national divorce. I think the part of the problem, the underlying cause, is that if you were to have a small group of people, they get along fine until somebody tries to hurt the other person. I knock you down, take your stuff, I call you names, whatever. There's some kind of harm that's caused.
Or some kind of conflict that somebody views could cause harm.
Right, yeah. And so...
They don't get a fair shake and an agreement. Or we all wanted to do some entertainment together and they disagree with what that should be. And so they're willing to try and force the other person to go along.
Right, and so that's a small group. But then when you extrapolate that across an entire country, the reason we're having so much division and strife is the fact that we've legalized the government to harm people. And people use the government against others. And so some of that is the quantitative easing. They print money, which literally strips the money you've got in savings. It takes the value of the labor you've put in, which is a harm. It allows them to do civil asset forfeiture and just take things from people. It says to, if you're on a New York subway and some guy's threatening to kill you, if you actually step in, we're going to charge you with a crime. But all of the people who are intentionally breaking into stores and stealing stuff, we've just decided that we're not going to persecute. In fact,
they're not allowed to stop you.
The person being proposed for the district attorney for Massachusetts actually wrote a paper on it, and she had a list of crimes that she said prosecutors just should always dismiss. And it was trespassing, larceny, breaking into a home, whether it was vacant or not. Like a whole list of things where, like, well, if you're just going to say these aren't crimes, the government is legalizing harming other people. And so it's pitting people against each other, each of them trying to use the government to use that legalized harm against the other. I think that's the split between left, right, Republican, Democrat, however you want, progressive, conservative, that it's pitting them against each other, trying to use government so that government harms the other one to their benefit. And I think the solution is, well,
feel free to finish that sentence. You think the solution...
I think the solution is you have to get rid of government's ability to create that harm. It has to lose power. So that's a nice way of putting it. Unfortunately, I don't think you can...
You don't think you can get there peacefully?
I don't think you can get there peacefully. I think you can get there peacefully. I don't think you can get there by keeping the government intact. I think as long as all we're doing is changing people and going through the same cycle and the government still exists, all we're doing is changing who controls the power. The only way for that power to stop existing so that nobody can use it against each other is for the government itself to stop existing. And that scares a lot of people too.
So my opinion is there's a third option, but it requires something that appears impossible. And that is that if you had the people, if you had the citizens actually educate themselves, actually take accountability and responsibility for themselves, and then actually issue government, push it out of their lives so that they're not accepting the harm that others are trying to perpetuate for them in their favor. At which point the government loses its power because it doesn't have the consent of the governed. And those systems would become they wouldn't be popular any longer, and they could be weeded out that way. I don't see that as possible because I haven't seen it happen.
I think it just creates...
I haven't actually read of it happening.
I think it just creates a different division, and it's literally the people saying, no, we want to use government versus the people who don't, and the people who want to will try, and then so it still leads to violence. It's just a different way to divide.
Who was it that said you can vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out of it, or something like that?
Almost everyone with a brain who's read history. I've said it. How's that? Yeah. Who said it first?
The ballot box can get you into socialism, but the bullet box is required to get out of it?
Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting.
I could guess, but I don't know.
All right. So... let's talk probabilities and timelines.
Okay.
Probabilities. When I've read the good book.
Do you want to go through?
I've read the good book. I think that at some point, before what Paul the Revelator saw can happen, there needs to be this 7-year period of persecution where those people that want righteous things are abused and suffer at the hands of those that want unrighteous things. Those that want truth suffer at the hands of those that want lies.
Yeah.
And my argument in our conversation earlier was that that's already happening.
It's been happening for longer than 7 years. There's almost not a period of time where that doesn't happen.
It has. Although it's now
it's
a matter of law.
Distinct, yes.
It's doing it under color of law for maybe the first time clearly in history.
Yeah.
There's some small instances maybe that have. So let's talk about
probabilities. Do you want to go through each of those main things?
It's like a sporting event. About? It's like, okay, well, so
we're putting odds, Vegas odds.
How many points? What are the odds? What's the over under for the 5-year, 10-year plan?
Okay. Do you want to do just in general one of those 4 things happens, or do you want to talk about each one?
I think we should give each one of those 4 indicators that we talked about.
Invasion, economic collapse.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's do it. And I think let's break it down into a 5, 10, 20 year option.
okay.
So I think so let's talk about each one of those individually. Let's talk first about was it the grocery store?
Yeah, people start starving.
People can't find what they want or need at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So 5-year, 10-year, 20-year likelihood over and under of what you think the likelihood of that happening in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Well, seeing as how it looked like it was almost starting to happen during COVID, and then again with baby formula shortage.
I'm talking like
there's nothing available.
No, not nothing, but it's like long term, like basically the new reality.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're waiting for the food truck to come in and people are lined up waiting.
Because realistically, we're talking about societal breakdown. My opinion, and I could be wrong, I told you what my opinion was earlier. My opinion is that when the United States of America, operating on the promised land, promised to mankind by God, my opinion is when this collapse happens of a freedom government set up under direction or with inspiration from Christ himself, when it collapses, I think we basically are I think we are ushering in the second coming of the Lord. And the rest of the world is evil, and Christ and his followers build up the millennium reign.
Okay.
Right. So when I say grocery stores are empty, grocery stores never returning again to the glory that we have today.
Yeah, it's the Maduro diet, but it's here in the U.S. You know what the Maduro diet is?
I think so.
Okay. Within, what was it, 5, 10, 20?
20.
Let's go 5 years at 10%, 10 years at 25%, and 50% at 20. Sometime, at least flip a coin within the next 20 years.
Okay. And I would say 20% in the next 5 years, 50% in the 60% in the next 10, and 90% in the next 20. I think it's almost a certainty, given the social breakdown that I see around the world. Here's the problem: is that I think some of the other issues will cause that to happen, but I don't think it happens all on its own, and that's what causes it may not
the
happen
issue.
in a vacuum.
So,
my argument is that it
just that it happens at all. My numbers might be low.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to scare people.
That's interesting that you're more optimistic than me on that.
I know, I'm way pessimistic.
You're the one buying a cattle ranch in Missouri.
I'm moving out. In fact, I said earlier today, just randomly to people, that I can't wait to be able to transfer most of my wealth into livestock. Because as much as gold is a good store of value, the biggest symbol of wealth and way to store wealth throughout time and any culture is the number of animals you have. The size of your herds. And so while I have, gold and silver and crypto and food storage, and I've got guns, and I've diversified into 1,000 different things, I need to put some of it into, I'm buying a cattle ranch. Because I want to be able to feed my family.
Cool. So groceries, we've got that. Groceries looks, both of us agree that more likely than not in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. What was the other one? We had
that. We had a dictator actually coming on TV saying we're going through
something else
systemic changes.
Between that.
We had the lights just going out.
The lights going out. Let's talk about the lights going out.
So this is going to be outside of just natural phenomenon,
solar
flare.
breakdowns, because society broke down.
Mm-hmm.
The complex machinery that causes power to happen is
yes.
No longer
so this is, you can no longer buy the transformer because the parts aren't available. We can't get the supplies out of the mines or whatever. We just can't keep the system running because of entropy, and eventually they turn off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I would say 10, 30, and 80.
See, this is where for me.
Because to keep us from killing them, when I say them, I mean like the dictators that would be our slave masters. They will want to keep us entertained as long as possible. And they will do anything. They will sacrifice us by the millions if needed to maintain entertainment for the masses.
So your numbers for this one were lower than the last one,
Yeah.
and this one for me it'll be higher because I think that system is so fragile that a dozen good people could knock out power to 90% of the U.S.
Well, I mean, one simple EMP over Ohio would knock out
It
the.
would have to be way high to get the whole U.S., but if you do one over Salt Lake and one over...
That's what Congress said, way high.
Right, two.
Over Ohio, you would knock out the power grid to 80% of the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
you'd have 100 million people die within a month.
But then you also have like a solar flare can mimic the same thing. In fact, they had Senate hearings on what it would take to harden the system so it couldn't do it. And the price tag was like $100 billion. Like it was not that much. And Senate said, no. I know, $100 billion, not that much. I know. We're passing like $2 trillion bills now. Like it's crazy. But yeah, they had the opportunity and it was like 0.01% of the national budget, one-time expense to harden it. And they said no. But yeah, it can be done EMP wise, it can be done blowing up dams and bridges. It could be done just shooting out transformers. I honestly believe that that's been happening on the East Coast. People have been running trial runs on how easy it is to knock it out. It could be lack of supplies and we just can't fix things and eventually they go out. It could be some kind of economic system where even the Hoover Dam stops running after like 20 years because people stop cleaning out the intake valves.
So what would you be your percentages?
So mine would be a lot closer to yours. I would go... 20% in 5 years, 50% in 10, and 90 or 95 in 20.
Wow.
So really close to what yours were for the no food.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now let's talk about.
And I think that one happens first, and then you end up with food shortages because of lack of power.
Yeah, everybody uses what fuel they've got just to survive, and you don't end up getting trucks transporting goods and machinery harvesting, and I got you. All right. So now.
I think it's a greater vulnerability that people will use.
With an EMP, the power goes out, and then immediately the food supply dies up because we all use electronics to create food these days. I mean, your wife still milks cows by hand, but I was never taught how to do that. I was taught how to milk cows by machinery.
It's not that hard. A lot of people learn real fast.
My hands don't have that kind of
All
right, so what was the next one?
Somebody actually gets on and says, revolution, we're
somebody with some kind of somebody well-respected or at least understood believes.
The president comes on and says we're invoking national martial
Donald
law.
Trump, when he announced COVID, everybody saw that. Like when Edward Snowden came on and said, your government's spying on you. All right. Somebody says what? What is the message that they're saying?
I don't know, martial law, or we're changing government systems, or I think martial law is one that people
overthrow of the system.
I think I think they'll use the wording of martial law because that's something people might accept, even though it really is just an overthrow. Likelihood of that.
Systemic change announcement. Okay.
I think this happens because the other ones are happening. And it could be the right doing it because they think the left has, taken things too far. It could be the left doing it because we want socialism.
Couldn't it be like, hey, look, the dollar's crashing. We're moving to a new thing, and we're putting all these new controls over, government law changes. So the food supply might still be working, the power might still be working. I mean, you kind of need power.
It could be the dollar's failing. Here's our new central bank
Here's
digital
our new
dollar.
CBDC, or what they call it, Central Digital Bank Currency.
Central Bank
CBDC.
Digital
Central
coin.
Bank Digital Coin.
Yeah. So it could be that.
And then they are like, this is a worldwide thing, because they're seriously trying to do that.
Yeah, turn in your dollars.
The UN's been trying to do that ever since I went there
digital
25
coin.
years ago.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that That's a big problem.
I took my kids past the UN this last week.
No, did you throw a Molotov cocktail?
We just waved.
Oh.
And they were like, what is with all of
Did
those
you
poles
wave?
sticking up in the air? And I was like, they put flags on those for all the countries that are there. And they're like, there's that many countries. Because there's hundreds of them.
Yeah, there's one for each.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's hundreds. Yeah, okay.
And there were no flags because they're not meeting right now. Anyway.
Yeah, interesting.
It didn't feel quite as dark either. So that place is evil and it feels like it.
Yes.
Anyway, all right.
Because government is the church of the devil. So,
all right. So
anyway,
over under on announcement of transitional shift.
So if it's a digital coin, I would go a lot higher than the other ones. I think.
Sure, but I would say digital coin, worldwide scale. Like I'm talking systemic shift.
Yes.
Digital coin could usher that in. A new global agreement where like
other countries seem to do this all the time.
Other countries do it all the time.
Let's do.
I mean, there's hundreds of other countries, and one of them a year would take 200 years to do them all. So
20, 40, 80?
20, 40, 80. In the next 5 years, you think there's a 20% chance
every 5 years
of systemic shift? I would say 40, 50, and 40.
If we go long enough that the odds go down?
I think if we make it the next 10 years, we probably buy ourselves another decade or two.
Could be. Okay. Interesting. Somebody come back and check this video in 20 years. Let us know how we did. Fact check us.
What is today? June 8th.
June 8th, 2023.
In 2028, June 8th, if we still have food, power, and the freedom to get together and talk about things, we should do a follow-up.
We should do a follow-up. Okay. Put it on our calendars.
Cool. I'm totally going to put it on my calendar. My phone is over there, so I can't.
Yeah, the last one is invasion.
Last one's invasion. Yeah.
You're first. What do you think the odds are that we have an invasion?
Invasion on U.S. soil, 5, 10, 20. I don't dare. I'm really pessimistic in this regard. 60% at 5 years, 30% at 10, 20% at 20. If it's going to happen in the next 20 years, it's going to happen.
I don't see how the percentages can go down. If it's 60 within 5, it has to be at least 60 within 20.
Well, my argument is if it doesn't happen in 5 years,
right, then it goes
gets
down.
less likely after that.
But you know how the numbers work for that.
I got you. All right. Well, if that's the case, then I'm going to say 60, 65, and 70. Like, I think it's only slightly more likely if we make it past the next 5 years. Because I think, realistically, what I see right now are two major world conflicts. I see the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which appears to have been triggered by U.S. meddling. Big surprise.
Yeah.
And I think that battle plays out with the Donald Trump indictment. I think that it plays out with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the bribes and all of that stuff. I think that it's being covered up. It's interesting to me that Snowden went to Russia for safety. But Ukraine is supposed to be the good guy in all of this, and I'm not sure. So I'm confident that there are no good guys in this one. So China clearly is saber rattling. They're getting other countries on their side, and holy cow, China. And you want to talk about revelations? You talk about the bear. You talk about the eagle. What was the other one in the Armageddon War? I want to say it was Russia, China, and the U.S., but I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think if it's going to be coming from Russia or Ukraine, it'll happen in the next 2 years. And if it's going to come from China, it'll happen in the next 5 years. And if it doesn't happen in the next 5 years from more likely one of those sources, then I think it's happening everywhere else, and they're just waiting until an opportune time to cross over and join us into the next World War.
Okay, I have game planned in my mind multiple ways that this might happen. Like just when I'm having nightmares and I wake up.
But our mutual friend that has a ranch in Montana,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, Montana, he was like all in. He grew up there. He thought that was a cool place for it. And then he's like, oh no, Russia, Ukraine, Montana's a whole lot closer to Russia.
Oh, yeah.
And if they're going to
So
try
that's why
and
he's
send missiles over,
Arizona.
they're going to start sending missiles over. We're going to be trying to shoot them down. There's going to be fallout in Montana. Plus, there's a bunch of silos in Montana. We learned that with the spy balloon crossing over. Like, he's like, Montana might not be the smartest place. I probably need to have backup plans. Let's get Arizona because that's where his wife's from. That's why he was looking at Costa Rica, like way out of the way.
El Salvador, if you're going anywhere. I think there's a third logical one as well. But I think it's the blue helmets. I think it's the UN. I think the UN that we've already talked about is evil. Gets called in by our own government to put down
Rebellion,
racism or a gun epidemic, or they're picking on trans people, or who knows what it is, but some kind of social whatnot, and they get it is a foreign army being called in, but it's being called in at the behest of half of the country to put down the other half.
So I want to take us down a segue here. There's a book that I read, and I'm not sure which one it is, but I'm pretty sure it was Visions of Glory. I don't know if I told you about that book. So the guy in this book claims to have had several near-death experiences where he had visions.
Right.
And one of those visions, he said he was in a parking garage in downtown Salt Lake, and there was a massive earthquake. And downtown Salt Lake flooded, right? Like crazy flooding, right? And people dying and disarray and no power, and the grocery stores got completely just scavenged, and it busted through the point of the mountain there in Bluffdale, so you couldn't really get machinery between Salt Lake and the rest of the state. And there were kind of like masses of people stuck in the Salt Lake Valley, and so it was like complete chaos and horrible times. And he said that it was interesting, the church, in his vision, which I don't know happened, and the Spirit didn't testify to me in any clever way that it did happen.
Right. Yeah.
In his vision, the churches organized the relief effort. They had food stockpiled. They started using the church houses as like shelters. They started giving out food, and they organized the temporary government to keep things civil. And the Mormon church headed that up, but the other churches had jumped in. The Mormon church, of course, being the largest church by numbers of population, buildings, money, and infrastructure, especially in that part of the state. And they were running fairly well. And he said like a month later in his vision, a bunch of blue helmets started coming in. And he said they were Chinese.
Yeah.
But they were UN branded. And
yeah, so if our dollar goes defunct and BRICS succeeds, they will be controlling the UN and could easily be the blue helmets.
He said they came in and they were giving out food, but then the food had strings attached, that there was a new structure that was being set up and you had to go with their structure. And the people in Salt Lake were like, no, we don't need your structure. We're good. Like we've organized. Yeah. We're fine without you. And there started being like this, no, you have to do it our way. And there was kind of this conflict, which became a violent conflict between these peacekeeping forces and the church-organized government at the time, the theocratic Republic of Salt Lake. Anyway, and so the blue helmets triggered that in my mind. I was like, well, there's some guy that had a vision that claims that's what happened.
Yeah.
That was going to happen.
So, yeah, I think that's you covered Russia, China. There are absolutely possibilities. I think the UN is another, possibly more likely third. And I agree. My percentages would be very close to yours.
Which is most likely in the next
50,
5
60,
years.
70, yeah.
And maybe only slightly more likely as time draws on.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it that makes 5 years? So let's. Those were the options. Those were the four, right?
Yes.
What is it that makes 5 years, 10 years? What to you in your mind distinctifies the difference between 5 years from now and 10 years from now and 20 years from now?
It's proximity. It's closer to us. It's easier to see there, and so. But you're saying why is it so high in that time?
No, I'm just saying in your mind, how can you draw distinctions of difference between 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years? What do you expect will change? Because lots of things don't change. They stay the same. What is it that you think changes between 5 years and 10 years from now?
I think the cultural drift of the left and right sides of the society continue to get more distinct and prominent. The overlap between conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans continues to drift further and further apart. People are less and less likely to put up with or listen to each other, and view each other as the other side is the enemy.
Instead of differing viewpoints or opponents.
Yes, and so instead of simply disagreeing on a viewpoint, they're actually my enemy.
We see some of that already. Clearly.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give names of people I say are absolutely my enemy. But it's not random person in the street, right? Anyway, and so I think I don't see any way to mend those. There is no cultural cohesion. Churches used to do this really well in every community where people had a cultural cohesion. You'd go to the same place, you'd watch the same shows, see the same movies, have the same kind of cultural experiences. And that just doesn't happen anymore. There's nothing that makes us relate to the other people, even in small communities.
And culture, have you seen?
And so, but because of that, I think I don't
the new
see
releases on Netflix, and you have I want to ignore all the bad in the world, like the Hallmark type movies, and then you have the glorifying or focusing on human depravity. On the other side, you have this huge divide that keeps growing. Like one side's all about demons and zombies and murder and kind of this the dark part of real human existence, and then you have this other side that's like, oh no, everything's fine, we're just going to put doilies on everything, and we're going to meet the girl of our dreams while vacationing in the mountains from our fancy lawyer job in New York or whatever.
Yes. When her car breaks down, the handsome woodsman will come out wearing his plaid, whatever he is.
Or vice versa, the guy shows up and he gets home cooking.
He's always the son of the mayor who owns all the businesses.
I'm the son of a mayor and I own a business or two.
Maybe you are the hallmark hero of every
married. All the good ones
show.
are taken.
Yeah, your
There's
wife
some human
lucked
depravity
out.
there.
I didn't mean to describe you, but I kind of did.
I know you worship me. It's okay. You're the president of my fan club, and I think you might be its only member this week.
Probably. Anyway,
all right,
so that's what I see. What do you see? How do you distinguish 5, 10, 20?
So the distinguishing characteristics for me, I would classify. I listen to and watch a lot of Bloomberg, like financial media, and I can. That's cable news, maybe, because that I do consume cable news. I thought I didn't. I like listening to Bloomberg. I like listening to BBC. They call it political risk. So political risk being something could change in the marketplace. And it could change for no reason, just because of the whims of the political ruling class.
Yeah, the legislature decides such and such
product
is not available.
Look at crypto this week.
Yes.
I mean, they're trying to classify cryptocurrency as securities, which Ripple has been trying to do forever because they think that gives them an unfair advantage in the marketplace, and it does. And they've been doing fairly well. Bitcoin is kind of getting a pass because it's not smart contracts, it's just a currency. But nobody uses it as a currency. It's an investment as much as anything is. It's too expensive to really use as a currency, too expensive to transact. Although I have made an order this week on my website. I had an order made with cryptocurrency, the first one outside of our test cases, and they paid with Bitcoin.
Awesome.
They bought $11 worth of product. They bought a gasket for a toilet with $11 worth of Bitcoin, and I don't remember when you tested what your fee was. It was like $4, so they actually paid $15 to buy an $11 product. Good for them. We're happy to have sold it, but with all the exchanges closing down, that makes it a little bit more complicated. So
the political risk. It's all the stuff that allows Nancy Pelosi to trade and make millions. Allows them to also crush others.
For me, the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year looks like this when it comes to political risk. We have an election coming up, a presidential election in 2024, which is next year. Right? What we have currently is a president that's probably too old and senile to really rightfully be in the office that he's in now. Although, whatever, he still can get up in the morning. He's not drooling on himself. He falls over from time to time. It looks like he was wearing a diaper the last time he fell over in the pictures, and I feel bad for the guy. Like, I think it's elder abuse what they're doing to him, but at the same time, he's been in the Senate and in Congress so long that the talking points are instinct. He doesn't even have to think about them, which is good because I don't know that he can, but he has those talking points. And he's fairly good. I mean, there's lots of flip-ups. He messes up all the time. So do you and I. We just are on national TV when we do. It looks like they're going to run him again.
When was the last time you said Trubada Nabada Shabada pressure? That's a quote from Joe Biden.
Never. Again,
Okay.
I think it's elder abuse. I've said lots of horrible things. I think I invented the coulda, woulda, shoulda. I don't know. I have all kinds of silly redneckisms.
No, it's fine. I get it.
So either they run him again, which I think is fairly likely and horrible.
Oh, he's running again, and they're going to not even host debates to let anyone challenge him.
Yeah, and I see that, and I think that he's a great puppet for what they want. They don't care because
His senility is a perk. It allows the people who are making the decisions and running things to just control him.
But, there's a chance that he dies in the meantime, which there's a chance that you and I die in the meantime. While
I'm not going to knock on wood. I'd be okay with that.
But, then you're like, okay, well, who else are they putting up? If what they want is someone who's so senile that they can't really, it's a perk.
Mm-hmm.
Without getting too descriptive, it's a perk. Who's the next that they put up there? They put up an AOC.
Some kind of
just
imbecile.
willing to go along.
So that would be, John Fetterman fits the bill.
Kamala.
Pete Buttigieg,
AOC.
who doesn't know enough to
What
read.
about the lipstick wearing suitcase stealer? What's his name?
I think he's been arrested again. I think he's currently in custody.
Yeah, but it's not a felony. You can run for president as long as you don't have a felony.
Yeah, so that's true.
There are felons in Congress.
Yes.
There aren't any, then there are actual felons that just haven't been convicted.
It could be Kamala. She was vice president, and she's obviously too dim-witted to hold her position either. She could be easily controlled.
All right, so then it flips. So assuming that happens, they continue to run roughshod over our rights.
Roughshod.
Roughshod.
Yes.
Not roughshod. Thank you. Roughshod over our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And with another victory, which it looks like nobody has really made any significant changes to update the election systems to make sure that people getting ballots are the right people and that there's only people filling them out and turning them in that are the right people. There's been lots of audits about whether they can count.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my kids had those kind of audits in elementary school. They're called tests. And it's not that hard to count. But to actually prove that people have the right ID, that they're actually the ones turning it in, there's really no systems to verify that. And none of that has changed. And so it's possible that regardless of what happens, they get reelected. And they feel the same way that the Tsars in Russia have felt for decades, which is that you can't unseat them so they can do whatever they want. So for me, 5 years is, okay, either the Democrats or Republicans that are basically sellouts to freedoms and human rights get elected and run roughshod over our rights and make it unbearable so that these things happen.
Yes.
Or by some fluke or maybe just intentionally, somebody who actually says the right things and maybe actually wants to stand for the right things gets in, and they stir up the ignorant masses to burn the whole country down.
Right, so this is a good person with good values actually wins. All of the power-hungry people will destroy things rather than let... And maybe they even use their power to screw with the election. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe the elections are fair. I don't think so, but I have to at least concede that it's possible. That they have... How do we exist in this world?
That they have somebody that gets elected that actually wants to make things better and actually has good values. And they intentionally let that happen, or it happens as a fluke, and they want that to happen so that they can stir up the people into an apparent revolution. Chaos, riots, burning down, violence, property damage, so that they can then exercise military control over the people, martial law,
I think that's a
government
near
control of all the
certainty. If a good
systems.
person happens to win, that's a near certainty. Because when Trump won, like from the day he got elected, there was all sorts of collusion in the bureaucracies to not follow his rules. The Pentagon lied to him about troop numbers that we had in Syria. The FBI colluded to run a coup on his campaign with the Russia hoax crap. There were pundits galore out there saying, I let us go through economic collapse as long as we get rid of him. You know, go burn the cities down as long as we get rid of him. They'll absolutely burn everything to the ground to get rid of a good person. Whether it's Trump or not, any good person who gets in, they'll absolutely burn.
All right, so for me, we're talking about the delineation between 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. For me, good person, bad person, there clearly is a widespread, nationwide effort that in the next presidential cycle to have major systemic shift.
Yes, absolutely.
And that happens in the next 5 years, but before the next 10. So that's the delineation for me. I see a political risk that I cannot see they do not use no matter what happens, while we're all worrying about politics and right and left and liberal and progressive and conservative and libertarian, while we're all fighting over that. During the term of the next during the next presidential term, I think that there will be a systemic shift. And that systemic shift will lead to the percentages we talked about. One of the four elements: grocery shelves empty, power outages, what's the word
declared
revolution? Not revolution, systemic shift. I mean, clearly declared shift, or what we see in the movies is after Armageddon,
the dystopia,
dystopian reality or invasion. And I think one of those four things, if it's going to happen in the next 5 years, it's going to happen because of the political risk. In the next 10 years, the only way I see it going 10 years usually on those elements is because something slowed that down. Some cultural shift, some education, some movement. I mean, you remember the 9/12 movement. You remember the civil rights era, the Tea Party. I mean, there's things that slow those down. But unless you can capitalize on those movements to actually make a cultural improvement, unless you can actually culturally shift, I don't think you actually rein that back to a
I guess we
society.
didn't talk about Civil War. That should have been on our list.
Should have, though.
As a sign where people say, you know, society is failing, yeah, Civil War should have been on
Sure,
the
but
list.
how do you organize a civil war in the society where the two sides are interwoven like wheat and tares?
I think we did once.
There was some geographical lines.
And there are still. There absolutely are. Look at every congressional or presidential voting map.
Look at them by counties.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Every city over 500,000 generally was blue, and every city.
That's what I'm saying. There are clear geographical delineations.
I mean, you'd have the whole countryside against all the cities.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it might not be much of a war if as peacefully as possible, you could literally barricade, you could
even
lay siege to the cities and
even
just
in
starve them out.
Really conservative states like Texas, the entire organized power structure of the state is in the big cities, even the conservative ones.
Okay, so the biggest indicator across, you know, in all civil wars across time on which side is going to win is where does the military go? Whichever side the military goes with wins.
Did I poke you?
I did hit it. I warned you not to, but it got me.
You've been waving your hands, and I keep watching.
Yes, and then I.
You keep getting closer, Tim.
Right. So
Sorry, cool.
while the current leadership has absolutely at the top of the ranks put extreme left side people in place, I don't see any way that the commanders way downfield don't break to the right, and the leaning of the military has always been towards the right side of the line here, which happened. The next biggest one is resources.
But the unified chain of command tends to pull them the other way because the generals in the hierarchy up in the ranks lean to the left.
Right, that's
Because
why
they
it's
want the
such
power
a
and
problem
finance.
with our current leadership. Yes, it's really a massive danger right now. That there will be the military could split both ways. The second biggest indicator is control of resources. As we just talked about the geographical differences, who controls the food, the water, the electricity? All of those things come from those red countrysides.
Right, but they're all mortgaged to the people in the urban cities.
Right, but we can just go turn them off. When it comes to actual warfare, you just turn them off.
Again, that becomes the question of appetite for actual warfare.
Yeah.
Because the good people that are running a tractor out in the fields generally aren't as willing to consider that the ends justify the means.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, they want to avoid the unpleasantness of it, but if it's that or you're going to be indentured, enslaved,
They're indentured and enslaved now.
I know that is a problem. So my biggest fear is my biggest fear is that we don't have some kind of societal shift. That everyone's going to go, and they accept it. I'm far more concerned that happens than that one of these other things do. I think we go through one of those, we will rebuild ourselves, and while any of those will be bad, they are still better than if we do nothing.
It's interesting on the perspective. So you and our common friend who has ranches, your perspective is, I will be on my ranch. If the whole world tears itself apart, I'm safe. And so you don't have the cognitive dissonance that comes in from people that are dependent on others.
Absolutely would not say I'm safe, but it's still...
It's easier for you, again, because we're talking about cognitive dissonance that will make people accept servitude, indentured servitude, slavery in their lives out of fear, right? So it's interesting to me that you don't even allow the consideration of, like somehow regaining. Like for you, it's clear cut that an absolute collapse and rebuild is preferable.
Yes.
And I find that people that have some kind of dependency on society, civilization, they tend to hold out hope and consideration that there is a preferable method.
To be fair, my entire income is dependent on the government existing.
Sure.
And
Well,
I would still let it collapse.
Not your entire income. But there's other... You have some holdings. I mean, you have silver, you have gold, you have crypto, right? Like those things.
Right, but I already have
converted
those.
into income.
Everything I have coming in is all government VA benefits.
Sure. But if you have land, because...
But I would happily let all of that go in order to regain the freedom they've stolen.
Again,
I am not...
Again, my
yes.
observation
Yes.
is that those, which is 99% of the world, that are dependent on society, continue to hold out hope and continue to think that the collapse and restructure is the worst scenario. Because they don't know how they lived through it.
Well, how do you reconcile that statement with the fact that you think if the wrong person gets elected, that the left side will just burn everything to the ground?
No, I'm not trying to reconcile. I'm making an observation.
Right, but are those people
making
not
an
also
observation.
reliant on the government? Why would they burn it down if they're also reliant on the system?
They're burning it down because they're trying to gain favor from that government that they expect will feed them.
Okay,
There's cognitive dissonance. What I'm saying is that the people out there, 99% of Americans, in my opinion, that are dependent on society surviving, are unwilling to consider that an actual collapse of the governmental systems can be good for them.
Yes, I agree.
And when they're burning things down, what they're hoping is that their tantrum wins the favor of the governmental systems in their favor.
Yeah.
Wins the attention in their favor. And so while they're burning down the things that would feed them, they're expecting it won't matter because their omnipotent government will solve that for them. And people like me, for example, who aren't buying a ranch in Missouri, who has a business, who's out there creating value in the marketplace. My hope is that society is able to become enlightened enough to push through without a collapse and just ignore the government. Because otherwise it collapses. And while I may have $20 million worth of assets on the shelves, somehow I'm going to have to protect those in a collapse. And most likely I'm not going to be able to. And I'm going to end up putting as many as I can on a truck and hope that I can shoot my way back to
My ranch in Missouri.
your ranch in Missouri. Yeah. And, you know, there's kind of that Ayn Rand called it a blank out, but really it's just cognitive dissonance. It's this.
It is.
It's this. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope I'm
So
wrong.
the question for me becomes, how is it that one of the two options that seems favorable, which is a collapse and rebuild of a better form, or somehow an enlightened transition, which seems very impossible
Very
to me.
unlikely.
But how is it that one of those things happens other than march into slavery in the next 5 to 20 years?
How is it that one of those happens instead of just falling into dictatorial tyranny? How is it possible that happens?
Well, so the collapse and rebuild looks like it will happen.
Yes. Yes, yeah. You're asking how it happens, though?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those movements you talked about, like the Tea Party or the 912 or Antifa or BLM. One of them gets enough people and marches on the White House or some such and gets control of a major seat of power.
Is that why they've made insurrection such a potty word?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly why the leftists try to brand January 6th an insurrection. That's exactly why. It's because they want people to have the revolt against insurrection, even though the videotape shows officers opening the door, leading guided tours. Yeah, that's exactly why they use that term.
But otherwise, if it isn't a concerted, deliberate effort that actually marches and tears it down deliberately, it's an incidental, accidental. They couldn't keep it at bay because they violated principles so long it collapses outside of their.
Yeah, so there's that, or there's the government, the monetary system collapses because of we printed too much money, and other outside nations stop accepting it, and so something replaces it. So that kind of stuff is just entropy within the system causes it to collapse.
Okay, so given again, our percentages on those ranged from 10% to 60% on the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So in that over-under, the safe places to be so that you can maximize your survival and your comfort during that transitionary period. What are the safe...
You want geographic regions, or do you want...
What are the steps? Because not everybody has the ability to acquire enough land to live on.
Well, I mean, it's all your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're talking about to keep yourself alive, it's do you have water? Water is life. Do you have water? Do you have a way to turn that water or something into food? Do you have shelter from elements? So it's where do you need to go? It's wherever each individual has the skills to do that. Outside of those things, the safest place to be is going to be surrounded by like-minded people, having a good community of friends. It's going to be, if possible, somewhere with natural protections. An island would be very good.
Distance.
Right, yeah. For the same reason people say the U.S. is so sheltered as it has oceans on its sides, right?
Sure, but even I mean, in Missouri, for example, the distance between everything is so stupid. You're not going to have like those urban riots that you see in
St. Louis
coming into Iron County, Missouri. Like that, the distance is too great. You don't get there without buses or cars
or a multi-week walk,
Yep.
multi-day walk kind of a thing. Yeah, and so
and resources to fuel
right.
that.
So if you have a big river, mountain ranges, just a whatever kind of distance between
or
you
community
people.
defensiveness, like
Right.
Iron County, Utah has the gorge that could be easily
So it's got
dismissed.
it's got physical barriers.
Mountains that are pretty difficult to traverse, other than on the roads to the east and
Right.
west.
What I'm saying is building physical barriers like walls takes a lot of energy and time and manpower. So if you have some natural ones in the immediate aftermath of a collapse, if you just have a river and you can get rid of a bridge over it, or there's mountains between you, that serves the same purpose to help maximize the chances that you survive. So,
There you go. There's our dystopian analytical.
have some
conversation.
energy source, make sure you have a source of water that when the power goes out and the money doesn't buy anything, you can get water. A way that food is just kind of natural and easy. So if you can fish, if there's a lot of wildlife, if gardening comes easy kind of stuff, or you can hole up in a supermarket.
and enough to get you through until
Right.
you've gathered, you've either grown your own food or you've
Yeah.
gathered food.
Like honestly, if you and 20 people, your closest friends, can take over a fully stocked Costco, you might be able to survive a year inside, and you've got walls and you've got food. After a year, when things hopefully kind
so
of
you're
quiet
also in the
down.
middle of an urban area where you're going to have lots
Well,
of
that's why I said if you can hold it. So there's other things where it's possible. But yeah, just the key to surviving is just make sure you keep surviving. If you just refuse to die,
All right,
you
so
win.
people participating in society that maybe aren't right now looking for protections, they're not taking the big steps. People that are cognitive dissonant, or they don't buy
They think we're not jobs.
the over under that we've got.
Yeah.
What are some steps that are low risk for them that would be reasonable, that would actually help them persist in that interim?
Learn some basic skills, rudimentary first aid, how to identify edible plants, maybe how to hunt, shoot a gun, kind of whatever. It's stuff you can do that's low key, that doesn't make you a prepper, kind of stuff. Stockpile a little bit of food in your house, maybe buy a water filter, learn how to collect rainwater, those kinds of things.
Organize with your community.
That's what I was going to say. And maybe
Side.
most importantly is be part of a community, have a close-knit type, know your neighbors kind of a thing. Even today, the person most likely to murder you is somebody you know. And so do the best you can to know the people around you, so they're less likely to want to come to kill you to get what you have. Right? So yeah, that might be the most important one. Is
I
know
had
people.
a friend that was like, Brad, when it really comes down to it, and I can't get food on the grocery store, I know you have some. And I'm like, so? And they're like, and I have guns, because that's what they buy for their prepping. And I'm
Yeah, I got guns
and I'm like,
too.
that's fine. You're gonna come to me and you're gonna shoot me for my food. And they're like, well, before my kids starve, I might. And I'm like, what you realize is that I have some too. Like, well, I have more. I'm like, all it takes is one.
Yeah.
You're coming to me on my turf.
Yeah, it's a flip a coin. You never know the outcome of violence. That's why anyone who actually understands, has been involved or trained with violence, avoids even so much as a simple bar fight, because you can never predict how violence is going to end. So anyone whose game plan is, I'm just going to shoot people and take their food, well, they got guns too, you moron. You cannot rely on that. That's dumb. Have some, but don't plan on using them to enforce your will. That's what's going to lead to this problem.
Yeah. Anyway, good steps. I also would argue that if you have lands, if you have assets that you're hoping to rely upon to survive, make sure they're safe, protected. There's some of those instances where there may be a bank that's able to foreclose and take that from you. Find a way to secure yourself on that. Be careful with who you bank with, maybe, but other than that, because it may not break down all at once. I mean, the banks may just start saying, okay, look,
You might
society is still working, but you're just broke because you didn't prepare for this new financial system.
Right.
So now we're going to take your stuff.
You might think you're safe because you have a successful small business in San Francisco, but things are breaking down there. You didn't realize that people are just able to walk in and break things. But things
But
haven't
if
broken
you-
down enough that
if
you
you
get
start-
to defend it.
That's right. If you start shooting at people,
Exactly.
then you're the bad guy.
Yeah, you're just the first one
Because
to reach
society
that
hasn't broke
level.
down to that
There will
level.
be other people there, but it hasn't broken down
My
enough.
opinion is it'll probably happen to that degree first.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Because it already
It's-
is happening. That's right.
Yeah, like even Hilton Hotels is abandoning 2 hotels in San Francisco. They've stopped making the payments. They've told their creditors, you can just have them, we're done. Like, they're just abandoning the city. It's absolutely breaking down in a lot of these places. Almost entirely Democratic controlled, these bastions of places where they say, we're not going to enforce crime laws. It's just breaking down. And it's as it breaks down there, there's a diaspora of those people into other communities, and then it breaks down in those.
It's a virus. All right, how do we cap this? I think
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. And if you vote for government to hurt people or take their stuff,
On your behalf?
you are evil. And we hope you burn in hell. But if you're voting against hurting people and taking their stuff, we love you.
Yes.
And we want to be your friend.
Yes.
Because you're the kind of people we want in our community.
Yes.
The end.
The end. Very good. Good to see you, brother.